think I can see a thumb sticking up, sort of as a silhouette through there. Oh, and another one. So I think we're going to start. So, very...
One person. We'll win them over as it goes on.
So very briefly, and we've only got half an hour of these two, so you definitely don't need to hear me talk too much. I'm Will Freeman, one of those video games journalists and generalist industry parasites. I assume I don't need to introduce these two too much. If you're in the room, you probably know that this is Rami Ismail and Mike Bithell. So I'm just going to dive straight into the questions, but just to get things going, let's give these nice lads an applause. To dispel, there was a little bit of rumour this morning that there might be a chess boxing match, but we are sadly going to stick to the Q&A format. They'll be fighting and playing chess in the car park afterwards, so you can all come down, and I'll be keeping the book on it. Yeah, street.
Yeah, the way it's meant to be played.
I'd also prepared a 7-minute introduction.
Skip that.
I'm sorry. We can
still do that. We still do the run on music.
Yeah. Right, let's get going. So, I wanted to ask first of all, and I was kind of saying earlier we all know who these two are, and really I've got a convoluted way of asking who you are, because I wanted to talk about the evolution of your roles over the years you guys have been doing this. Are you collaborators? Are you single auteurs? Are you generalists? How do you define what you do, and is it even helpful to do so?
Well, auteur theory is obviously bollocks. That's like, no, it is though.
Okay.
It is. Just like in terms of like, there's never one person who does something. Some people very humbly name their companies after themselves, but some people make mistakes early in their career and their paperwork gets complicated. And anyway,
you got lucky that your name sounds like it's just Bithell.
It does. It sounds like a joke.
Yeah.
Which is appropriate. But yeah, so I think for me it's always been about working with people. I'm just gonna keep moving, it's fine. It's always been about the collaboration. As it goes on, what I find is I'm giving up more and more of the things I originally did, because the way I was making games like with Thomas Was Alone, I did everything except the voiceover recording. I even wrote it, and the music, everything else was kind of centralized on me. And now, as with each subsequent game, I do less and less. Because basically there are always so many people out there who are better than me at any given job. So it becomes more about a curation job almost. It's more about finding the right people and just getting them together and making their lives easy while they do something cool. And I've found, as we've scaled, that's been kind of my experience. How about you, Rami?
I'm just thinking, if I name my company after my last name, everybody would think I'm a postal, agent office or something. It's like Ismail. That doesn't...
When it absolutely, definitely has to arrive in 2 weeks.
Yeah. For me it's very similar. I started out a programmer. Yeah, I'm still a programmer, I guess. It's kind of, since I was 6, I wanted to be a programmer. I wanted to code video games. Started modding, and then eventually started this company with this guy I don't really like, who also dropped out of the same university, and we just kind of started working together. And that was the second time I worked in a team. The first time I worked in a team was for a small independent studio in the US, remotely over a forum, making space games. But yeah, at Vlambeer, the weird thing that happened is one of us needed to do the business, and he's definitely shit at it. So I just ended up doing it. And then it turned out that I was pretty okay at it, so we just kind of kept going with that. As the company went, obviously, you take all the accounting and legal and management, HR, all that suddenly becomes your own. So you gotta grow up pretty fast. In my case, because I had no idea that those words existed. And then eventually, at some point, it's sort of second nature for me now. This is just kind of what I do, and the amount of programming I do is not as much as I would like to very frequently. So I've started to hire some people that help me deal with my mailbox and my schedule and stuff like that, just because otherwise I don't get to do the stuff I came here for. weeks.
And is it fair to say then both Vlambeer and Mike Bithell games? Sorry, I have on my tax return. I just put my name for my company.
That is literally
Will
how
Freeman.
it started out.
Yeah, exactly.
That freelancer.
Yeah. But
We drew a bear on a piece of paper and put it on fire. Like,
right.
it's also very
I'll
reasonable.
do that in my next tax return. So I guess in a way it feels like, you know, I know Mike, most of your games aren't made by just you. Seems to be the case. Like looking at, I know Minutes, I think you've been a bit involved in.
I was not involved in that at all.
That was a real collaborative experience. I just wonder if there's this kind of model of studios you share or that people could think about and ape that is you're kind of a hub for picking the right collaborators rather than being a...
I forget which director said it. Like all good quotes, I have no idea who said it. But there was a film director and he was talking about essentially his job is primarily casting. It's just getting the right people together, and it might even be a Spielberg quote. But it is that thing where, auteur theory is a great way often to kind of shorthand discussion around media. Like it allows us to kind of follow a trajectory and go, okay, so Tarantino's making a movie, I have an idea of what that is, but actually you're thinking about his editor. And actually I think, unfortunately, his editor who did a lot of his early work passed away, and now there's a different editor, and that coincides with a period where people say Tarantino's completely changed his style. He didn't. It's just the people he worked with changed. So I think auteur theory is really useful as a consumer of media. I think in terms of creation, it's so rarely the truth. It's so rarely the way it actually works. I don't think that's unique to us. I think most things are made by groups of people.
Yeah, no, I mean, auteur theory is not bollocks, it's just not applicable to the games industry very often.
I don't think it's applicable to anything beyond writing novels, maybe, but I bet there's still like 5 people.
There's auteur games, there's games that are one person that just did everything themselves.
But they're the exception.
Yeah, they're the exception, it's not always applicable. I don't know, the quote that always comes to mind is Warren Spector complaining about always being attributed the entire game.
Creator of Deus Ex.
Says Deus Ex creator Warren Spector. Yeah, it just kind of happens. I think people often need that shorthand to keep track of what is happening, but I don't like it either.
Right, okay. Yeah.
Vlambeer is 2 people. We call ourselves a networked organization, so it's 2 people at the core. Right. It hasn't really grown beyond that personal assistant that we have now.
Yeah.
But a lot of contractors.
The rest is just contractors. It scales up and down. Search for the people we like to work with and trust. And
so that's just finding the people that are kind of creative and cultural fit.
Yeah.
Okay.
We try to find people that are creative cultural fit and people who are not a creative cultural fit.
Okay.
We try to kind of balance it.
Yeah. Why the latter?
Because otherwise we just have a bunch of people who agree with each other, and I don't really.
Right. Okay. So
which is a problem. Have you found this? Like, there is a problem where. Now that we've both been doing this for a while and we've released lots of games, I find when I bring new people in, especially younger people, I do have to tell them they're allowed to disagree with us.
Yes.
I've actually had to take people to on site and say, you clearly thought that was a terrible idea and you didn't please you don't do that. And that's just something that increasingly that's who you want, is people who challenge you politely. Friendly, no personal insults, but you want to be challenged. Otherwise we are doomed to make the same stuff over and over.
And creating an environment in which that is possible is actually a very tough job.
It's proactive, isn't it?
You have to make sure that you ask. You have to make sure that you create an environment. You have to make sure that if somebody keeps interrupting somebody, that you give them shit about it. You have to make sure that if somebody's really quiet in a meeting, to make sure that you check whether they want to say something or they actually are super okay with it just being quiet. There's a lot of... Living in the studio is a lot of social dynamics.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's people management, right? We're talking about these skills you've had to embrace that aren't coding for games.
It's always the weird thing about the games industry, because we always talk about being a coder and being an artist, and at the heart of it is just being a good collaborator, being communicative. Because people ask, what is the skill I need in the games industry? And it's be a team player.
Yeah.
That's the one skill. If you're pretty shit at art, but you can convince the studio that you'll be good to work with, you'll be curious, you'll learn, and you're a good team player. I'd be much rather hire that person and the artist who's really good, but they're also a complete ass and
I mean, I can't write for shit, like where I am at the moment. Also, it wasn't lost on me the irony that you were both in agreement that not agreeing was a good thing.
I think it's the first time me and Rami have ever agreed on anything.
Yeah, I know.
It's good that everyone could be here to see it. It's nice.
It happens. Moving on, I wanted to talk about, the kind of evolution of the current generation of indie, and I guess we could try, without trying to get distracted by defining what indie was, and of course there's indie in the late 70s and many different times, but the current, you do want to define what indie is?
No, I kind of have your answer, I think.
Okay.
Indie is bigger than ever, and also it is dead.
Right.
Like, it is both those things. Like, the beautiful thing about indie is that it has grown beyond any proportion we could have thought back when we were, I don't know when you started, but I was 2010.
I released Thomas in 2012. I didn't quit my day job until 2013.
So 2010, the whole idea.
I didn't make any money for the first time.
The whole idea of indie was like sort of like punk rock counterculture, like fuck these AAA assholes gonna make their own video games, which obviously is super immature, and I love AAA and all of that. We needed something to kick against. To start something. So we just kicked against it. We didn't even know anything was starting. It was just we wanted to make games and we needed something to be loud with. So we kicked against the biggest house we could find, which hurts your toes in the end. And then suddenly other people were like, oh hey, these people can do it, we can do it. So it just kind of grew. And at first it was a very, very small, very coherent scene. Right? It was like, 30 people, 40 people?
Yeah, I can remember a time when a game is being made by an indie wasn't news story, right? It was that small.
Yeah, no, I mean,
modest.
You would get Destructoid to write an article about it, but like that was, nobody cared about indie. It was also just not allowed to talk about money. Like I was probably the most businessy person in indie for that year or two. They all hated me for that. I was a suit. It was a thing. And now we're looking at indie as like this global force of developers worldwide. People creating personal games. We were creating platformers. Like that was kind of it. Like sometimes a smart platformer, but like platformers.
Often not a smart platformer, bolstered by.
Sometimes somebody added narration to the platformer.
That was
really
breakthrough,
weird stuff. But
the gameplay not so much, but the voiceover was solid. But do you not think, because I can hear where your argument's going, the kind of that we've grown and it's like, but do you not think we're just the last cycle? Like when I think of that, I see punk work happening where I look at it and I do not get this. And that's sort of the point, isn't it? Aren't we doomed to become kind of aging hair rockers?
Oh yeah, but isn't that
like, and then other cooler people will make new shit we don't get.
That's the cool thing. Here's the thing. The thing why I say indie is dead is because I think that is good. Right. I don't think that is a bad thing. Like I know I'm like an indie, whatever, like a visible indie. The best thing that has happened to game development is that somebody took a sledgehammer to all of these big concepts and just shattered it into millions of pieces. So instead of having indie, we now have like alt games and experimental games and all these different layers, personal games, like they're all like little fragments with each their own community goals, their community intent, their community heroes, the things they look up to, the things they want to change, the things they want to rebel against. And seeing all of these little shards reminds me of my travels, where I go to a country and it's this small little ecosystem of their own developers, their own heroes, their own growth, their own purpose, their own culture, their own history, and I want more of that. Because in the end, independent, to me, indie, meant that you didn't have to give a shit about what anybody else gave you the label. So if you want to be indie, just call yourself an indie and let's be done with it. Right. Like, I don't really care to
So having defined indie, what was the question?
Well, I don't. Rami didn't let me finish. No. Well, it was actually last night when Ninja Theory, who are an indie, won the Indie Award, and then the next award was the Major Studio Award. And I can't remember who said it to who, but you and I briefly mentioned, Mike, like, well, could they also win both? And would that be a brilliant thing, or is it really that it's not just indies become the establishment, but across the spectrum of industry ecosystem things have changed. I wonder if there's surely it's a great thing if we got to that point where an indie studio was also winning major studio.
I think we as an industry far too often assume we're inventing everything for the first time. like within our little niches and also just within ourselves as a media. The stuff we were talking about earlier about like how to manage teams. Like people have known how to do that for hundreds of years. You can go into any airport and find a $5 book, you know, the 10 tips to managing a team, which will say all the stuff we just said in, you know, much less time. And I think that we're kind of tripping over to learn lessons that others have already learned. And I think that's inevitable, and I think that's culturally good because we'll find new solutions to things like that. But with regards to that, like, yeah, every major studio started as a little studio. Electronic Artists was a bunch of people who broke off with Activision, right? That wanted to be indies. Yeah, but EA's an indie studio. Like it's further along its trajectory, it's doing something else. And along the way, there were lots of peers of EA, I imagine, who stayed small or died or whatever, in the same way as there's lots of indies who are contemporary to Ninja Theory who will stay small or die or change or do stuff or grow as well.
Or get bought by Microsoft.
Say again?
Or get bought by
Microsoft, yeah.
Win the indie award.
The ultimate indie accolade. We got Microsoft.
You did the indie.
One day, guys.
You got
You'll
it.
make it.
But obviously, cool that they won that award. But these terms like this really only become a question or a problem when we start giving them value beyond self-moniker. And
when it becomes like indie is good, AAA is bad, then yeah, you inevitably are going to trip up. But we're all just making video games, and there are challenges and flaws at all areas of the games industry.
I just hope we fragment more.
Right.
Yeah. Smash this whole thing.
Yeah.
Like,
Right. Well, let's move on to a bit more talking about actually making games. And I wanted to ask you two about what you've learned, or I don't know if it's what's changed or what's stayed the same, in terms of through the process of from the conception of the idea to finishing making a game, how much you let what that game is change through its evolution. Have you learned to resist that and stick to your initial idea?
We're very different on this one, I think.
So you thought that might happen.
So I came up, my first job was Blitz, and anyone in the room who worked at Blitz, I think a lot of people in the UK industry worked at Blitz. I remember we had 9 months to make a God of War meets Prince of Persia game on Wii. Sure. So I come from a background of like making stuff really quickly. So I tend to work with the team to kind of work out in pre-production like an idea, and then just work really hard to deliver that idea as best we can. So I iterate on an idea, but I don't find the fun a year after we started. We barrel towards the end, which is why we ship games as often as we do. It's flawed in lots of ways, it's good in lots of ways, but that's my approach. My perception of your work is that you guys are much more experimental and kind of you find the fun and dive into it.
Well, yes, but also no.
Okay.
Like most Vlambeer games are made in 2 days. Like not even exaggerating. Like JW will have an idea. I'll sit down with him and be like, "This is cool," and he'll make it. And then 2 days later, it is done. And then for the next 6 to 8 months, we polish it. And then in some cases, our games take radically different directions in the middle of that, and that has happened. We had a top-down roguelike that turned into a first-person shooter because it turned out we were shit at top-down roguelikes at that time. And we were just like, well, I guess most of this code is useful and the assets are cool, so can we just turn this, can we flip the sprite from flat to up? And then just make a first-person shooter out of it. So that's what we did. Very often we'll find we'll have an idea of what the nugget of the game is, but then during development we'll make adjustments and course correct. But in general, if you look at the original drawing that we did of this is probably what the game's gonna look like, we pretty almost always nail that exactly for the final game, even though the game might have nothing to do with it anymore.
It's interesting though because, and this definitely isn't a negative, but it's just an interesting kind of facet of that approach. And it's similar with game jam stuff. Is if you're making games in 2 days and then polishing them, by definition, you're making the kind of game that can be made in 2 days, right?
Yep.
Do you find that limiting? Do you ever think, I want to make this grand game that's going to take a long time to make?
Yeah, when I'm older. It's not for now. I'm having a great time just making small stuff.
Sure.
The one downside I will say is that it's really easy for somebody else to see the game and then make it in 2 days and then put it on the app store. Yeah, somehow that keeps happening. But yeah, in general, I feel It's actually, for me, it's a very healthy way of making games because you very early on have like, okay, this works, this is cool, this is interesting.
You know from really early on that the fun's there.
Yeah, and to be fair, a lot of what we enjoy doing at Vlambeer is just polish anyway.
Yeah.
Like I love the polish, yeah, the kinesthetic, the like impact, like the feel of things, the movement, getting the right thing on the right button, you know, making sure that it all is interesting. And then like
we were very cruel to that. Are you in the audience? The chat.
Oh yeah. This game we played.
Someone came and asked us for advice, and we like spent half an hour just
talking about the kinesthetics. Yeah. But yeah, like that is for me. That is the fun of like, okay, we've got this little interesting prototype that is interesting to play. Now let's make it interesting to everybody, but making it feel great.
And you actually, only popped into my head as you were saying it. You're like, that's when I'm older. That's for later. Do you? Like occasionally I'll say to someone, you seriously be writing about video games when you're 65? I'm like, this feels weird, but yeah, I kind of hope so. Like, do you feel life is in this? Can you imagine, will we be here in, I don't actually know your age is relative to mine, but when we've all got silver hair in 20 years? And
well, so I'm 32, and yeah, I do the maths every day. It's like, okay, so probably I'm going to be able to, hopefully, you know, if I make better dietary and exercise decisions, hopefully I can kind of probably be working up to about 65 is my assumption. So, you know, fingers crossed. So that gives me 33 years. 33 years, if I take, you know, 2 years to make a massive game, which would be massive for us, then I can make 15 more games. And that's a horrible realization. So I plan out, and that's a deal I make with myself on every project of like, you have X amount of time where you're willing to spend on this. But I'm very conscious of my own death. to a degree that's probably like not completely healthy.
I feel like getting that.
But like, I do think about that. It's kind of morbid. But to answer your question in terms of like, the other thing that I think is really interesting is our players are aging, and we're already starting to. And it's something we did with the kind of shorter narrative stuff we've done recently. Is specifically going, we're going to make a game for like a busy 40-year-old. And the challenges of that and kind of some of the success we found with that has been around catering to an audience that is aging, and presumably that audience will keep aging. So there will be people, when I'm 65, I'm probably not going to make games that are going to appeal to a 15-year-old, but there's probably going to be enough other older players who will play it. So I'll cater to that.
Is this a question that starts happening when you're 30?
I don't know, I'm nearly 40.
Oh, Rami, it'll come for you.
Are you working out how many games you can fit into the next 30 years?
Like, it's interesting because I guess we are very different. I was once a little closer to a mall shooting than I would like to have been. So for me, every day that I'm around is already sort of a blessing that I didn't really feel like I have to count on. So at this point, I'm just like, let's get through today.
So you're developing in the day, not...
Yeah, and we'll see what happens.
Blotting out your...
when I say like that's for later, it means I'm okay with that not happening.
Right, okay.
But
now
if it does, it's cool. But that's the thing, like, I guess you come at life from what happened in life, and if part of that is you almost died, then you just... You just kind of go, okay, well, fair enough. Maybe this happens again tomorrow. Maybe that's it. So
I'm worried that this is narratively going in kind of an Aaron Hamilton direction, and you're going to kill me in a duel later. Like that's
I mean, the chess boxing match is still on.
We don't. Since I've realised the filming, I'm a bit less keen on us being so public about our street fighting plans for later, so let's leave that between us.
There's a state in the US where if you challenge somebody to a duel and they accept, you can actually have a fight legally.
There's apparently everything is legal to do with shooting someone with a bow and arrow over the or something. I've got plenty more questions, but surprise, surprise, time is flying. We've got just under 10 minutes, and I get the feeling there might be a few. We'll see. Does anyone already want to throw their hand up and ask anything of these two about games?
Let's do the 5 minute, just like, let's do your questions, like rapid fire, and then
Alright, well, I've got a bit of a peculiar one, but it was partly inspired by my own position as an obsessive hobbyist, but also when we were watching the football last night, and I was interested when I asked Mike about the conventional sports interest you as bits of game design. I don't want to already be answering your question, but like, it was more the ecosystem around it that interests you as a game designer. Where in the world do you see gameplay mechanics or find interest, I guess I'm not particularly interested in football, but I find the mechanics and rules and scoring system of the game interesting. Like, where else in the world, like, I don't know if you wanted to pick up on that point about what you see when you're watching a game of football as a game.
So I'm fascinated about the meta game of football more than the actual reality. I like listening to people who know enough about football that they're talking about like the statistical analysis of long-term goals. 538's like obsession with like politics and baseball from the numerical perspective is something that I enjoy. But no, the thing I'm very nerdy about is theme park design. Theme park, like I will I dragged my mate Ben to Disneyland and literally just walked him through queues. I made my girlfriend queue for the new Guardians of the Galaxy ride, even though we had like a fast pass ticket thing that we'd queued up for, just because I wanted to see if the right-hand queue had different or the same illustrations on the walls, because I wanted to work out how many cycles you go through and get different experiences. So theme park, because theme park is, I mean, Walt Disney's a controversial figure, rightly so, but like in the 50s and early 60s, he was genuinely one of the first video game open world designers, and he had no idea that was going to eventually be a medium that was available to everyone that wasn't a billionaire with challenging social places.
How might making your family members queue when they don't have to at a theme park, but how might that inform one of your more narrative games? For like, does it directly?
Oh, for sure. Like, so like Subsurface Circular. Anyone who's in the room's played it. There's advertising on the walls, which is doing world building, which ties into plot point puzzles that's happening in the dialogue, which then loops back to. There's a clue that Thomas was alone as a religion in this world. Spoilers, which is revealed via an advert on a wall before. So it's that kind of meshing of environment and storytelling is something that absolutely. I like having music play with
that. Honestly, made it so much more epic.
Wasn't it? It's good. So it all loops back. I want to hear Rami's answer.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, theme parks are actually also a pretty big inspiration on our end. Documentaries. I like football as a sport. I like most sports, to be honest, except for baseball. I don't really get baseball. I just don't understand the game in baseball.
Right.
What's huge to me though with football and specifically is I think it's probably the most global language spoken on earth is like kicking a ball.
Yeah.
Like it's weird to think about, but I always like to think of games as just like a small aspect in this larger field of play. And within like play being pretty much the oldest medium on earth, like probably before the spoken word, the written word, like we were playing, because otherwise we would have never survived until the spoken word. So for me, soccer is like the most pure expression of that playfulness. Not necessarily the World Cup version of soccer, but wherever I travel, whether it's peace or war or rich or wherever, if I put a ball on the ground and give it a kick, they'll kick it back.
And you can see a direct connection with that interest or the fascination you find in that and the game making.
I mean, the same thing applies to what is it, Clash Royale or Fortnite or whatever. I don't need to be able to talk to you. But if I see a crack in the wall and you're playing Zelda, I'm going to point at it like, hey, did you?
Yeah.
And I don't have to be able to say like, cracked wall. Like we both understand that wall is cracked, so you're going to put a bomb there, which video games teach us so much messed up things. So if there's a cracked wall, you're going to fix it, I'll blow it up. But my mom pointed it out when she was but yeah, no, there's so much language that play develops that is sort of understood as like non-threatening, like pleasant, like conversation that we can have without even being able to speak. So if soccer can do that, then clearly our medium is capable of it too, because we're working the exact same genre. I think we already do. It's just for me that is fascinating.
Yeah. And who are you supporting last night?
That's a very bad question.
Right.
I was very quiet for most of that time. Well, at the first I was everyone around us. Well, I really tried not to, but it was a very good goal, the 2-1.
You booed whenever it went out.
I was for the guy who was cheering for France at the awards.
Yeah, that's good.
I suddenly feel like I'm sort of Gary Lineker in these two.
I'm decided to sneak off the stage at the end of this.
Probably because I was trying to get.
I mean, like
Actually, it's like something about that.
Right, I'm going to interrupt this.
I'm Dutch, like we didn't even make it through the
one of my many happy questions, which is like the...
Are video games art?
Yeah, are video games
Yes.
the advice that you now would give to the new to development.
Wait, so I have to travel back in time and give myself.
Are we giving it to like
You're giving it to
90-year-olds now, or we're going back in time?
I would hide. I'm pretty happy with where I am now.
Right, so you wouldn't want to...
No. Can you imagine, like, me going back and telling, like,
He's dead.
Yeah, but 10, 12-year-old Rami, like, don't do this. I'd be like, who the hell are you? Get the fuck out of my life. That's fine.
Right, so you won't be appearing in your own bed.
No, please no.
Right, I'm forgetting about the mechanics of the time travel and whether you physically appear there or not, would you?
I'd be like 100 people back on an island.
And you put a narrator in
So
there.
it's happened to me, two people were talking on Twitter, and I tried not to interrupt conversations, they included me on Twitter between other people, but some people were talking, and they were saying, like, they were using me as an example of, like, you should call your company after yourself. And I did not it and went, don't do that. It's like, you're gonna have to spend 2 minutes every time you're in front of a group of people, embarrassingly, and bringing it up for no reason. Don't do that. So I think, yeah, that would definitely be one. Like basically be ready for the potential that your dumb hobby might actually become your job, and that you might actually have some of the success you're hoping for, and make some decisions accordingly, as long as those decisions don't happen in your current life, and survive. That's the other thing. That's the one thing. And that's sorry, I want to quickly say that. Right, is there is no way of like making a hit game or being successful in a way that's kind of a planned, repeatable event with 100% certainty. The best objective you can have is to survive, be healthy, be happy, and keep making stuff and hope that basically, again, thinking of like the career in terms of like years before you die, like remember hoping that at some point, as long as you're healthy and happy, at some point the thing's going to happen for you, maybe, hopefully, but if it doesn't, you still live a good life.
But also do all the opposites of that. Just start and aim for the fucking stars, like, I don't know, just do whatever, like, don't believe in surviving, believe in making the next, like, big hit thing, like, be naive of it, like, have that, because honestly, like, we can say
and
that.
one day you can sit next to the person I advise, and these are two separate worldviews.
Yeah.
Both valid.
Come in, do whatever the hell, right? Like, it's not a job yet. Name your company after your last name. Be an arrogant asshole. Like, make your dream game. Like, do whatever. Make every mistake. Everybody gets there through the mistakes. Like, this is not, one of the problems with advice is that advice is always given from our perspective, not towards your perspective, because we don't know you. If you give advice from your own life.
Also talk to people who maybe didn't get onto the stage, like people who didn't work out, like have a conversation with them, and also just don't ask like people who've been doing, like I can give really good advice for making a pretentious rectangle-based platform in 2012, and then basically riding that success for years. Like that's good advice. I can sort you out with that, but like anything else ultimately is limited.
But that's kind of the beauty of the games industry of many creative industries, but of the games industry is that it doesn't really matter all too much what path you take in. Like, sometimes shit works out, right? And we've reached this weird point in the industry where if you do everything right, you're going to flip a coin 25 times, and if it's heads 25 times, then congratulations, you've got a hit game. And in any other situation, it's, well, hopefully you survive.
You have to walk to the shop to buy the lottery ticket.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
And then we always talk about how to win the lottery, which is like, I woke up every morning.
I was always do that talk, yeah, the lottery is like a repeatable certain event.
And it's not, like, it's the games industry, so you work hard and then hopefully maybe something works out. So if you're going to give this a shot, you might as well bring your dreams. Because if they work out, you'd rather be stuck to your dreams and...
Right, shot both.
You'd rather be stuck to your dreams than your last name being your company name,
Right, we strictly are out of time, but does anybody have any questions? It's a chance. I really can't see any human beings with their hands up. Oh, I can.
Pretend somebody asks a question that they talk about first place.
Apparently, I can't see a hand up.
Oh, you back down again. Go on,
Maybe make your dreams asking more questions.
Yeah. Don't make a question.
Hi, Mark, Rami. Thanks. Always a pleasure to hear your voices. Rami said it's the plays the English language, and then he said, "Oh, they teach us strange things like blowing up balls." What would you want to teach the world other than to sing?
I was going to say the same, yeah. What we want to teach the world? I teach the world.
Through a game or just
Through a game? You mean? Yeah. Congratulations. It's weird because I always falter on this kind of line between I want to make entertainment, but also like if I tell you that kind of defeats the object, I want to kind of quietly do the things I want to do and maybe something gets out. Always want to teach people.
I mean, in general, life is that being playful is fine.
Yes.
We, especially in the West, we've gotten really good at being very only kids play. In my games, it's different per game. Like we made one game to teach people that it's shitty for, I think, National Geographic to make a documentary about Yeti hunting, in which a guy who said he saw the Yeti was treated as if he was an ass. So he made a game in which you have to hunt a Yeti, but there is no Yeti. But one player out of 10,000 plays gets a Yeti. But it's pixeled in slightly the wrong resolution, so if you take a screenshot of it, it definitely looks like you photoshopped it in. So they took a screenshot of it and posted it on Twitter. And then everybody was like, well, clearly that was photoshopped. And we waited for a week before we revealed that that was actually us.
So I made a game called Volume in 2015, which was about how kind of nationalism is a dangerous idea and we shouldn't trust billionaires and assume that they're good at their job because of their wealth. So that worked well. That one I really got the message out and kind of saved the world there.
I think people might have taken it as inspiration instead of a warning.
The funniest thing was in the recording booth, Andy Serkis had read the script, he was talking to me about it, and he said, so it's basically Alan Sugar but evil, right? And that is, yeah, it is sort of, yeah. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I don't
assume people will learn the lessons or even pay attention.
Yeah, I don't think I have a lesson, but I like for every of our game, we don't make a game unless we want to say something with it. So Nuclear Throne was sort of a response to all the sci-fi being like, Matthew McConaughey is gonna save the world by going into space and saving us from the brink of destruction. We're like, fuck that, let's push the world over the brink of destruction. What happens?
And it's colourful and fun.
Yeah, it's colourful and fun and happy, and I want my sci-fi to be aspirational, and I'm a little sick and tired of the world is gonna die, because I can just look outside and say, yeah, you're right, the world is gonna die. So give me the other story. Give me hope. That's what sci-fi is for me. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, that's a really great question. I think we can squeeze one in. Yes, I can see someone nodding, so come on, somebody's...
But here's the thing,
we said
that was
so
a really great question. Now everybody's like, well, shit.
Sorry, that was a really mediocre question.
Yeah. And it's a terrible question.
So my question is, how do we know about making a pretentious block-based puzzle platform from 2012?
I'm really sorry, I know that was a joke at my expense, but I didn't understand it. It was something about...
How do you make a block-based platformer with narrative be a hit game in 2012?
You make it, and then you wait 6 months where it makes 10 quid a day, and then a YouTuber makes a video about it, and then suddenly everyone pretends they always liked it.
I never pretended that.
No, you always wanted it.
I'm still so Mike and I have a thing where I don't like how Mike names his games.
Yeah, that's true.
Because it's Thomas Was Alone was about Thomas having friends. And then Volume is about being quiet. And then what was Earthshape?
Earthshape was about planets that aren't shaped like Earths.
Yeah, and also they're not Earth. They're it's like this, and then Subsurface Circular. It's like a rectangular subway.
So crucially, and this is 100% true. Subsurface Circular was the point where I started deliberately naming my games in this way. So at this point, every game I make intentionally is broken in that way, just to troll him. Up to that point, it was stupidity, but from that point onwards, so the next one you're going to love.
Oh God.
And at least you've clearly learned the lesson from naming your company after yourself.
Just name it completely ridiculously.
Yeah.
I find
it's also Bithell, and it's high resolution games.
So my favourite thing in the world is that no one can consistently pronounce Subsurface Circular, Quarantine Circular in conversation. So the number of fun mispronunciations I hear, or people misspelling it on Twitter, it's brilliant. It's the worst names ever. They're great. No one can.
You know that for ridiculous fishing, we also bought ridiculous fishing because everybody spells ridiculous wrong. So we just keyworded that as well. We're like, if you have a game, here's a quick pro tip. Always get the misspelling of your keywords.
Or name your game like with words that are less than 4 syllables.
No, seriously, Nuclear Throne, we did the same thing. We also have Nuclear Throne.
Oh, that's smart. That's smart.
Because people sometimes don't know how to write like nuclear.
Yeah.
Right, I think it's time for us to wrap it, and I think that was kind of a poignant note that we can all carry forward to let our games industry careers flourish. No, seriously, thanks guys. We'll see you at the car park for the test boxing.